plain words, the days of just trying out basic analytics are gone. And most companies are aware of it. No matter which industry you look at, businesses are putting in a lot of money into making analytics a fundamental part of everything that they do. They're trying this because they want to tap into the benefits that advanced analytics can bring to their business. But here is the catch. Even with all the investments, top level executives are saying that their companies are struggling to actually get the full benefit. The problem is that while they might be getting some small improvements for a few specific uses of analytics, they're not successfully integrating analytics into every aspect of their organization. So, what does analytics at scale look like? How do you deliver the right insights to the right people at the right time in a way that informs their decision making to drive better business outcomes? We've got somebody with us today who is going to explain this in detail. Meet Hari Sarvanabhavan, a true heavyweight in the world of data science, analytics, and AI. With over 25 years of hands-on experience in leadership roles, he has been a driving force in the success of high-growth organizations. Hari is a PhD scholar, holds 2 patents, and is hailed as a thought leader in the space. Currently at Concentrix, he is the global leader for data and analytics. Welcome, Hari.
Shantanu, thank you so much for having me on this session. A warm welcome to all the listeners, of this podcast.
So, Hari, going back to the same question that I was kind of asking earlier, what exactly does analytics at scale look like?
A very pertinent question, Shantanu, which is, what is analytics at scale? Let me just start by giving a small background, right? When you're looking at analytics at scale, today organizations are grappling with the fact that there is so much of data being created in the digital world that they really don't know how to use it. They really don't know how to get the maximum throughput out of that data. So when you're looking at analytics at scale, there are a few things that organizations should really think through. One, they should have a very, very strong strategic imperative from an organization standpoint. What are you really looking to do with the data? What are the kind of outcomes that you're trying to drive, right? That's probably the most important thing from an organization standpoint. The second piece in my mind is some of the factors that are really critical from an analytics standpoint. Let me just outline some of those factors. Leadership. I think it's probably one of the most important variables that you're looking at when you're trying to build scale from an analytics standpoint. Management buy-in. Do you have the right kind of vision, the right kind of strategy from an organization standpoint? From leadership, you move on to information technology, which is really focused on your data strategy. Do you have the right kind of privacy, the right kind of security that you're really looking at? Do you have the right kind of systems, tools, and technology to really manage your entire analytics at scale program? Moving on from IT, you're really looking at human capital, which is focused on talent management. Do you have the right kind of domain expertise? Do you have the right kind of technical expertise within the organization? Do you have continuous learning, because analytics is a field that's ever growing day in and day out? And finally, a very, very important factor, which is called organization. And what does organization really entail? It entails culture, governance, process. All of these are very important input factors that really help an organization build analytics at scale. Now, having said that and built out these fundamental foundational factors, one important call out is, do you have the last mile connectivity for the programs to really run? Orchestration of your insights, orchestration of your intelligence is a very important factor that will help organizations build analytics at scale. If you just step back a moment, right, it's also important to understand that when looking at analytics at scale, you need to build out what is called a collaborative environment. An environment where data is democratized, insights are democratized. There is an input-output mechanism happening across the organization. Every input itself should become an output, and every output should really become an input in an organization. And that really is what analytics at scale is all about.
Oh, that sounds exciting. But to get the most from these analytics investment, how important, according to you, is to conquer the last mile by embedding analytics into the decision-making process?
Great question, Shantanu, and very interesting perspective, right? In my mind, if you don't embed your analytics in the last mile, it's going to be a daydream, right? Because you've done a lot of work, it's really not going to give you the kind of results that you're expecting. So embedding analytics in the last mile is really a very, very important call out. And believe me, a lot of organizations struggle with it because they focus all their energies and efforts in the upstream and not necessarily in the downstream, which is on the implementation portion. in my mind, when you're looking at implementation, there are a few things that are very important. One, it's important for your users, your end users, to have a perceived value of what you're really trying to generate through analytics. A lot of times there is a disconnect between what we believe is the value and what your end users are really looking at consuming. So perceived value is one of the important callouts from an organization standpoint. Two, very important, is the ease of access. A lot of times what happens is great models get built out, great reports get done, but accessibility is really an issue. And organizations don't spend enough time on this big factor called ease of access. The lower the effort for your stakeholders to consume your insights, your models, your reports, the faster is it really going to be from a deployment perspective, right? So I would say ease of access is really a big factor when you're looking at consuming analytics in an organization. And finally, third, very important is there is this terminology called translators in the data analytics world, right? You could call them data translators, analytics translators. What they do is they're really breaking down all your silos from a data analytics standpoint for your end consumers and stakeholders to understand. It's a very important call out, right? In fact, there are roles called data analytics translators today in the world. And I believe that holds a lot of importance when you're trying to democratize data, democratize analytics in an organization.
Okay, what is exciting for me now to understand from you is that how can we actually structure our resources and skills for optimal data maturity and probably set a very clear accountability and decision rights by role?
Great question, Shantanu. So when organizations are looking to get high value from analytics, it basically means that you're achieving high levels of maturity within the organization. As I mentioned earlier, to achieve high levels of maturity, there are 4 foundational or fundamental factors that are important. Leadership, information technology, human capital, which is really talent, and organization, which is governance, process, culture, and stuff like that, right? Those are really the foundational factors that are very important to achieve maturity. Now, when you look at certain markets and certain industries, like India and Southeast Asian markets, there are 3 more factors that I would imagine are very critical for organizations to focus on. One is use cases. Because analytics is a new science in many parts of the world, you need to determine the right kind of use cases that you want to bring to the table to drive the right kind of outcomes for the organization. Okay, use cases are a great way to start the analytics journey because that makes it pervasive and makes it a business function, a problem that you're trying to solve at a larger level. The second piece is advocacy or evangelization. Analytics is an art as well as a science, and you need to make sure that you have enough advocacy, enough evangelization of analytics within the organization. People need to see the results. A show and tell is probably one of the best ways to drive the value of analytics within an organization for more and more people to really believe in it, right? And the third important thing is what I mentioned earlier, which is translators. It's a complex science. People don't understand models and reports the way, a professional in analytics would really understand, right? So the end stakeholders need to make sure that they're able to decipher what you're putting out. So the role of translators is a very important factor in driving analytics maturity in an organization.
Now, this is getting exciting. So how do you actually transform data into valuable insights and then into actionable steps? Would you be able to kind of share that with us?
Thanks, Shantanu. Great question. And I really wish I had a magic wand to answer that. That's probably, one question that a lot of organizations across the globe are trying to answer for themselves. But let me try and give you a perspective on this, right? There is a concept called Uberization of analytics. It's a fairly good concept for us to understand this question when you're trying to convert data to insights to outcomes, right? What does Uberization of analytics really mean? It means that you're creating an ecosystem that basically democratizes data, insights, and actions within an organization, right? You're building high levels of transparency. In a Uberized environment, what happens is you're really not pushing any insights or outcomes. You're really creating a pull where your stakeholders are really asking for it. So you're not, it's really an environment where everybody's feeding off data and analytics versus it coming top down for the organization to really consume it. That's one. Two, an Uberization concept basically means you're collaborative, right? Every output that you have in the organization becomes an input. Everybody's really contributing, and every input in the organization becomes an output, right? So it's a complete democratized environment where you can convert all the data that's coming into the organization into insights and to actions. Third, typically in an organization concept, you also have a healthy mix of partners who really play along with you to drive the right kind of outcomes. I've always said this, and I keep saying that analytics is not a lone inventor game anymore. Analytics really needs people along with you. It's really an ecosystem of partners, vendors coming together to drive the right kind of outcomes. So partnerships is another big important call out when you're really looking at driving Uberization within an organization, right? And finally, most importantly, when you are looking at Uberization of analytics, there is continuous learning that's happening within the entire ecosystem. To me, in data and analytics, that's a very important call out. What happened yesterday may not happen tomorrow. That's how we really build our predictive models, prescriptive models, and stuff like that. So continuous learning is something that is embedded when you have an Uberized environment within the organization. And to me, that's probably closest to getting a secret sauce of really implementing data analytics within an organization.
Now that brings me to the last question, and probably the most exciting question of all. How can we influence the organizational culture to embrace data-driven decision making? I think this is a big problem that many organizations face, and probably you have got a lot to tell people about the same.
I would agree, Shantanu. In my mind, when I spoke about the 4 fundamental factors, the organization factor is really one of the most important factors. And what does organization really mean? It really means culture, process, governance. And all of this has really got to do with mindsets, right? So everything else is technology, systems, data, and stuff like that. But how do you really make sure that the human mind manages to look at the entire process of analytics in a very different way? I'm also going to step back and give you a perspective of the analytics journey, right? Organizations typically are moving from what used to be called gut-led decision-making to insight-led decision-making to now what is called intelligence-led decision-making, right? And what is really stitching this together, it is really data. So if you look at data as a fabric, moving in from gut-led to insight-led to intelligence-led, organizations need to really welcome this fact that, hey, when there is data in the organization, and when you're trying to process the data, evangelize the outcomes of the data, and really move the data and the output of the data, which is really analytics, into the decision-making process, organizations will really buy into this concept of being a data-driven environment as well as a data-driven company, right? This is where I believe that there's a lot of work that needs to be done from within the organization to make sure that you appreciate the processing of the data into outcomes that make a difference at all levels, right? It could be at individual levels, it could be at functional levels, it could be an organization or at an industry level, right? So I would just say that probably the most important factor that organizations need to focus on. And this is really a cultural shift that many companies will really need to look for to move from a gut-led organization into an intelligence-led organization.
Thank you, Hari, for taking the time out and giving us such wonderful content on analytics. I'm sure people are going to gain from it. And for listeners, do keep an eye on the third side. That's going to come again next week, same time, with a different topic, with a different speaker. And I'm sure it's going to get you a lot of benefit in terms of new learning and what you could possibly do in the space of analytics and data.
Shantanu, thank you so much for having me here. It was wonderful talking to you about what is my passion, which is data analytics and AI. And I'm really looking forward to a lot of organizations using this science the right way to drive better outcomes.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.